What's going on, everyone? I'm Casey, and today we are talking about tips for raising money for your startup. So earlier this year, my company, we raised our Series A, a little over $7 million. We're based here in Indianapolis. I want to share a few tips that I've learned. So we've raised money twice now, and I want to share what I've learned along the way. So I'm not going to detail my specific story, but I want to share the most important points as I've seen friends raise money, as I've seen friends go sell their companies, and I want to just talk about what I think are the tips for success. The number one thing that you need when raising money is, at least in my opinion, is traction. So if you can go to investors, if you can be that hot startup that doesn't need to raise money and you are off into the races, you have customers, they're paying you, and you can prove to investors that you actually have a business that can scale, there's nothing more powerful than that. For us specifically at each stage, we had plenty of traction. We bootstrapped our business initially, so we had thousands of customers, hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue. So we could, each month, so we could go and point back to that and say, hey, you know, this is a real thing. We have customers paying us. We want help going to the next level. So having traction is super important. Do you always need traction? No, but I think more and more are investors looking for traction. Now, if you're in Silicon Valley, certain areas or certain types of investors specifically invest kind of in the idea stage pre-product. And so I think that's an opportunity. Me as a founder, I would much rather go and test and prove and gain some traction to prove to myself how good the idea is and what scaling that looks like. I mean, you're gonna have all kinds of assumptions on what scaling that will look like, what customers actually want, but until you get customers, until you're actually walking through that process with them, you know, you're not really going to know. So point number one, tip number one is traction. Okay, the second most important thing I believe for raising money is a story or a vision. I think this is so important. I've seen friends go and try to raise money or go and try to sell their business, but they can't properly communicate a real vision. They're not able to take their investors on a journey to help them understand, yeah, this is where we're at, but look at where we're going. That's what you need to invest in, is where we're going. And here's why we're so much better than anything else out there. And here's why we are going to dominate the world. Here's why this idea is so amazing. To tell them, yeah, you know, we have traction, we have this many customers, we're making this much money is great. But to help them understand right now I am here, but this promised land, this is where we're going, and we're gonna be worth so much more. We're gonna be able to sell our company for so much. We're gonna have so many customers. These customers are gonna be so valuable and so forth. Like this, being able to take them on that journey is so important, because if you're just selling like, hey, we're making money, you know, we could make more money, like everybody believes that they can make more money, but not everybody has this grand vision, this grand story of how they're going to win. I think it just engenders so much more confidence in the investors, in you, and you know, just helps them to see the long term. So story and vision, super, super important. Number three is your team. Now, I think your team is really important. So not everybody will have an amazing team. So if you're just getting started, you probably don't have executives on your team that have experience at Sony or Microsoft or Apple or Facebook or Google. So you don't necessarily have this luxury, but the stronger your team is and the more well-rounded your team is, the more confidence investors are going to have in investing in your team. For us specifically, after our first round of capital, I went and made sure that we built out a really strong executive team. So one, so that we could scale and grow our business effectively. But then two, when we want to go and raise more money, we have a CFO, we have a chief product officer, we have people that we can point to that say, this person owns all of customer success, this person owns all of data science. And I think that's really important, and that again makes the investors feel more comfortable. You want to help investors believe that that future is coming true, and the more proof that you have to do so in the form of traction and in the form of your team, people that have been there and done that before, the more likely they are going to be to give you that money. All right, so I would say those are the top three. Some other important things that come to mind: financial management. So the more that you can show investors this model of each new customer we bring in brings us in an extra $1,000 per month, and here's how much it costs to acquire a new customer. Once you can start to get your economic model in front of investors where they can see that flywheel effect, they can see how investing in the company, spending money over here results in more dollars over there. That's again where you're gonna help them to feel that much more confident. So having a good model is important. Now, we definitely struggled because we didn't have anybody initially who could put these models in place. So we struggled with having this piece. And so we used an advisor, plus we hired a consultant to come bring in this model to this business that, again, was already making hundreds of thousands of dollars per month, but having someone come in and put this model in place was super, super important. Secondly is defensibility or competitive advantage, being able to clearly articulate to investors your competitive advantage. Why someone else can't easily come in the space and do just as good a job as you is really important. And if you're a startup saying, oh, we have a great brand, or we have better ideas, is not very defensible, or and sometimes it can be a good competitive advantage there, but to be able to prove that to investors, that intangible is a lot less concrete than investors are going to want to be able to see. So if it's a data play, if you have more data or you have a unique data set and each new customer you bring on adds more data to that data set, making you have a greater moat, competitive moat, then the more likely investors are going to be in investing in you. And the better you're setting yourself up. So even if you're not looking to raise money, understanding your defensibility, understanding your economic model, these are all things that are super important. So one thing that I learned in going through this fundraising process for the $7 million is there's a lot that investors wanted to see. They wanted to make sure that we were treating our data properly, that we were getting our data from ethical sources, essentially. And so these kinds of poking and prodding really made us ask these questions that maybe we wouldn't have otherwise. So making sure that you have an economic model in place is actually a really good practice. And you can see here are the 3 levers that I need to pull in order to move my business forward. So even if you aren't raising money right now, understanding these things and getting these things in place and in practice is going to help you better run your business. Another thing that you should have when raising capital is an exit strategy. Understanding your long-term goal, who you want to be, what you want this business to grow up to be is really important and is different than the vision. So someone whose goal, their exit strategy is, I just want to make a bunch of money so I can hang out on the beach, probably shouldn't raise money. It's a totally different business. And if you are raising money, you're going to want a totally different set of investors that you're talking to. But if you want to build a business that has high scale, has the potential to reach liquidity in either an exit or an IPO, you need to understand those things. And again, kind of painting that vision, that picture for investors of where you want things to go, helping them to understand potential acquirers is important. Is that potential acquirer a Google or a Facebook? Is that potential acquirer some private equity? Really understanding where you want to go or what that exit strategy is again going to inform the rest of the business. If you're looking for private equity to buy you, then you probably need to set yourself up for a profit. But if you want some tech company to acquire you, or you think it's some strategic in that way, then it's a lot better aligning yourself with them is important. But you also don't need to make sure that you're turning out a profit every month, assuming that's part of your economic model. So anyways, point is really understanding your exit strategy and being able to clearly articulate that to potential investors is super, super important. I almost forgot one of the most important things of this all. I'm going to put this number 4. Number 4 is connection. So I am not someone that spends a lot of time networking. I'm someone that likes to just sit down and do on my laptop, work with the team, and just focus in on hitting our goals, not necessarily going and raising money, not going out and building those connections. But I can't tell you enough how important those connections are. Those connections are the ones that have brought us both rounds of funding, actually. And it's not directly a connection with the investor. It's just building connections in our ecosystem. This person came from investment banking but wants to get into Amazon. So just helping people, building those connections, building those relationships. You never know who or which investors that will lead you to, but it's super, super important. So getting out there, rubbing shoulders with potential investors, rubbing shoulders with people that are connected with investors. Don't do it necessarily with this ulterior motive where you just want something out of it. Make sure that you're giving back. And I just think that connections are so important. Just hitting a VC up via email is probably not going to be the best approach, especially, again, if someone has connections and you want to be that startup that doesn't need to raise money right now, which is a good place to be in. Being desperate and just reaching out on some random email probably isn't going to be the best, but I'm not saying that it's not going to work. There are a couple other key things. You have to have a beautiful pitch deck that you can send out to investors that they can go through and be very excited about your business without having you give commentary over top of that. Because a lot of investors, they'll have a phone call with you and then they'll want you to send them the deck. So making sure that you have a deck that is really going to convey your business and that story, again, very well just in the deck without you giving the commentary is like super important. Obviously, making sure you don't have any weird personal expenses on your books, making sure that personal and business are kept very separate if you're just getting started is also important. And then something that I feel like kind of applies to all of this is you should start sooner rather than later. I mean, raising money can take a while, sometimes a long time, and going out and making sure that you're having these conversations, again, building these connections before you really need money, going out and trying to raise capital a month before you run out of money is not a good place to be in and is not a good approach. Going out and, again, building out those connections, talking with people, don't be desperate when you're having these initial conversations. I like to say, hey, we're thinking about raising money, and start getting feedback that way because they're going to start to give you very valuable feedback. Really understanding where you fit, which investors align with that is really important, but just go out and have those conversations sooner rather than later. One thing that I wish that we would have raised money sooner rather than when we did, just because I feel like we would have had more fuel to pour on the fire sooner and we'd be even further ahead than we are. So anyways, these are my 7 tips. I'm no expert. I've raised money twice, and I've had a lot of help doing so because I have a great team around me. But the vision was super important, and most important of all was the traction that we've had. We have a good model because we have a CFO, we have good defensibility, we have a great exit strategy, and we've had really good connections. I would say this has been our recipe for success when raising money. Everybody's going to be different. You don't necessarily need traction. You may not have a team, but some of these fundamentals are important. So this has been my tips on how we raise $7 million. I'm no expert, but these are some tips that have been fundamental to our success. Hopefully this helps you on your journey, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you want to follow my journey to making it, go hit the subscribe button. We're always posting new content as I work to build this business. And if you want to see the behind the scenes, the day-to-day, come check me out on my personal Instagram. But I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys later.